The hiss of an ancient cryogenic pod pierced the silence of the abandoned Iconian research facility. Edward Perry's eyes snapped open, his enhanced soldier's instincts kicking in before his mind fully grasped consciousness. He found himself staring into the bioluminescent face of an alien beauty, her elongated features marking her as unmistakably Iconian. "Welcome back, Edward," the alien said, her voice a melodic hum. "I am Primus, and I've awakened you for a purpose that will determine the fate of both our species." Edward's training urged him to reach for a weapon, but his limbs felt leaden after 500 years of cryosleep. The year 2543 glowed on a nearby console, confirming the passage of time. As his vision cleared, he took in the dilapidated state of the facility. Far from the cutting-edge outpost, he remembered on the fringes of the Andromeda galaxy. Primus activated the facility's systems with a wave of her hand. Holographic displays flickered to life, revealing a grim reality that sent a chill down Edward's spine. The data showed the devastating aftermath of a war between humans and Iconians, leaving both civilizations on the brink of extinction. "While you slept, our peoples nearly annihilated each other," Primus explained, her luminous skin pulsing with what Edward interpreted as sorrow. "Only a handful of survivors remain, scattered across the galaxy." Edward's mind raced, processing the information. He recalled his last memories, being part of a classified super soldier program, enhanced for peak physical and mental performance. Now he found himself face to face with the last surviving member of the Iconian High Council, awakened for a desperate plan to save both their species. Primus's next words stunned him. "I believe that by combining your enhanced human DNA with Iconian genetics, we can create a hybrid species capable of surviving in this harsh post-war galaxy." Edward's initial resistance was palpable. His military training screamed at him to view Primus as a potential threat. Yet as more of the facility's systems came online, the full extent of the war's devastation became clear. Entire star systems rendered uninhabitable, the few remaining pockets of life under constant threat from autonomous war machines left behind by both sides. Primus sensed his hesitation and pressed on. "I possess access to advanced terraforming technology. We can create a habitable world where our hybrid offspring can thrive, potentially saving both species from extinction." As Edward grappled with this proposition, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. External sensors detected an approaching fleet of rogue human warships, their crews driven mad by centuries of isolation and hell-bent on eliminating any alien life they encountered. Time was running out. Edward faced a crucial decision: trust Primus and her audacious plan for interspecies salvation, or attempt to rejoin the remnants of humanity, even if it meant perpetuating a pointless war. With the alarms growing more insistent, Edward made his choice. He nodded to Primus, recognizing her proposal as the best chance for long-term survival. "What's the plan?" he asked, his voice rough from centuries of disuse. Primus's bioluminescence brightened with what seemed like relief. "We must escape using my personal stealth ship. We'll evade the human fleet and search for a suitable planet to begin our project." As they hurried to prepare for their escape, Edward couldn't help but marvel at the twist of fate that had brought him here. From super soldier to potential savior of two species, he now faced the daunting task of creating a new hybrid civilization from the ashes of war. The title of breeder was far from what he had ever imagined for himself, but as the last hope for both humans and Iconians, he was determined to succeed. Edward's heart raced as he and Primus rushed through the dimly lit corridors of the Iconian research facility. The blaring alarms grew more insistent, their shrill tones echoing off the metallic walls. As they rounded a corner, a massive blast door slammed shut before them, nearly crushing Edward's outstretched hand. "Damn it!" he growled, his enhanced muscles tensing as he surveyed the obstacle. "What's happening?" Primus's bioluminescent skin pulsed rapidly, her alien features contorted with concern. "The facility's ancient security protocols have been activated. It's responding to the approaching human fleet by initiating a full lockdown." Edward ran his hands along the edges of the blast door, searching for weaknesses. "Can you override it?" Primus shook her head, her elongated fingers dancing over a nearby control panel. "Not from here. We'll need to access the main security hub to disable the lockdown. With a nod, Edward braced himself against the door. Then we do this the old-fashioned way. His augmented muscles strained as he gripped the edge of the door, slowly forcing it open. The metal groaned in protest, but inch by inch a gap appeared. "Impressive," Primus remarked, slipping through the opening. Edward followed, letting the door slam shut behind them. As they navigated through the labyrinth of sealed chambers, Edward's military training kicked in. He took point, using his enhanced senses to detect potential threats, while Primus's knowledge of Iconian systems proved invaluable in bypassing complex security measures. "Wait," Primus said suddenly, her luminous eyes fixed on a nondescript wall panel. "There's something here." With a wave of her hand, the panel slid open, revealing a hidden vault. Inside, they found rows of cryogenic containers, each holding genetic samples from various species. Edward's eyes widened as he recognized the labels. Human DNA and Iconian. These must be from before the war. Primus nodded, her skin pulsing with excitement. "This is invaluable for our hybrid project. We must take them with us." As they carefully packed the samples, the facility shuddered violently. Edward steadied himself against a wall. "The human fleets started their attack. We're out of time." They sprinted towards the hangar bay, the precious genetic cargo secured in a portable stasis unit. As they entered the vast chamber housing Primus's stealth ship, a metallic figure lunged at them from the shadows. Edward reacted instinctively, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge the attack. The assailant, an Iconian medical droid, swung again with surprising speed. "AMD-7, stand down," Primus shouted, but the droid ignored her command, its eyes flickering erratically. Edward circled the malfunctioning machine, analyzing its movements. "Its programming's corrupted. We need to shut it down." Using his tactical training, Edward feinted left, then ducked under the droid's guard. With precise strikes, he targeted key servo motors, immobilizing AIMD-7 without causing permanent damage. As the droid collapsed, Edward noticed a data port on its neck. "Primus, can you access its systems? It might have valuable medical knowledge for our mission." Primus connected to AIMD-7, her fingers moving in a blur across its interface. "You're right. It contains crucial data on Iconian human hybrid genetics. We should bring it with us." With the reprogrammed droid in tow, they boarded Primus's sleek stealth ship. The hangar bay doors began to close as another tremor rocked the facility. Primus's hands danced across the ship's controls, bringing systems online with practiced efficiency. "Initiating launch sequence. Brace yourself, Edward. This might be rough." The ship lifted off just as chunks of the ceiling began to rain down. Primus expertly maneuvered through the collapsing hangar, bursting into open space as the research facility crumbled behind them. Edward's breath caught in his throat as he saw the human fleet for the first time. Dozens of massive warships hung in the void, their weapons unleashing a relentless barrage on the Iconian outpost. "Activating cloaking systems," Primus announced, her voice tense. The ship's external view shimmered and faded, rendering them invisible to both sensors and the naked eye. With masterful precision, Primus guided their vessel through the gauntlet of human warships. Edward watched in awe as they slipped past kilometers-long dreadnoughts and swarms of fighter craft, totally undetected. As they cleared the fleet's perimeter and entered deep space, Edward felt the tension in his body slowly release. He turned to Primus, seeing his own mix of relief and apprehension mirrored in her alien features. "Where to now?" he asked. Primus called up a star chart, highlighting a distant system. "I know of a remote planet that might suit our needs. It's several days' journey from here." As they settled in for the long flight, Edward found himself studying Primus with growing curiosity. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, he sensed a kindred spirit in her purpose and adaptability. "Tell me about your people," he said, breaking the silence. "What was Iconian culture like before the war?" Primus's skin rippled with a soft, phosphorescent glow. It was a time of great scientific achievement and artistic expression. We believed in the interconnectedness of all life in the cosmos. As they talked, sharing stories of their respective cultures, and the 500 years of history Edward had missed. A tentative bond began to form between them. Their initial mistrust gave way to mutual respect and a shared sense of purpose. Meanwhile, AIMD-7, now functioning as their impromptu medical officer, began analyzing the genetic samples they had recovered. Its metallic voice broke into their conversation with a series of beeps and clicks. "What's it saying?" Edward asked, unable to decipher the Iconian machine language. Primus's expression grew serious as she interpreted the droid's report. "Creating a viable hybrid species is possible, but it will be incredibly challenging. We'll need to overcome significant biological hurdles." Edward nodded, his purpose hardening. "Then we'll overcome them. We have to." As their ship approached the coordinates of their potential new home, long-range scanners revealed an unexpected obstacle. The star system was surrounded by a vast field of debris, the remnants of an ancient space battle. "This complicates things," Primus muttered, studying the sensor readings. "Navigating this field safely will push our ship's capabilities to the limit." Edward leaned forward, his tactical mind already analyzing potential routes. "We've come too far to turn back now. Between your piloting skills and my combat experience, we'll find a way through." With their ship's resources dwindling and the ever-present threat of detection by roving war machines, Edward, Primus, and AIMD-7 prepared to face their next challenge. As they approached the debris field, the weight of their mission to create a new civilization from the ashes of conflict pressed heavily upon them. As they entered the debris field, Edward's enhanced vision scanned the chaos before them, his mind rapidly calculating trajectories and safe passages. "There," he pointed, indicating a narrow corridor through the wreckage. "If we thread the needle just right, we should be able to slip through." Primus nodded, her luminous hands dancing across the controls with inhuman precision. The ship glided gracefully between twisted hulks of long-dead vessels and shattered asteroids. For a moment, it seemed they would make it through unscathed. Suddenly, a massive chunk of debris, previously hidden behind a derelict freighter, loomed before them. Primus reacted instantly, but even her reflexes weren't quick enough. The ship shuddered violently as the wreckage scraped along their hull, tearing through their stealth plating. Warning klaxons blared as system after system reported damage. Edward's fingers flew across his own console, rerouting power and sealing off compromised sections. "Stealth capabilities are offline," he reported grimly. "We're visible to any sensors in the area." Primus's skin pulsed with agitation. "We can't risk continuing to our destination. We need to find shelter and effect repairs." AIMD-7 beeped urgently from its station, relaying critical information through the ship's computer. Edward's eyes widened as he read the report. "Life support is failing. We've got maybe 6 hours of breathable air left." Primus scanned their immediate surroundings, her alien eyes picking out details Edward's enhanced vision missed. "There," she said, pointing to a barren moon orbiting a looming gas giant. "That crater near the equator should conceal us from orbital scans." With their options limited, Edward nodded his agreement. Primus guided their damaged vessel through the moon's thin atmosphere, setting down with a bone-jarring thud inside the crater's shadow. As the ship's systems cycled down, Edward and Primus donned protective suits designed to work for both their species. The suits' gleaming faceplates reflected the stark, alien landscape outside. AIMD-7, continue working on repairs, Edward instructed the droid. We'll search for resources to replenish life support. Primus interfaced with the ship's computer one last time before they departed. "I've detected an abandoned structure 2 kilometers to the east. It appears to be some kind of mining outpost. If we're lucky, it might have what we need." They stepped out onto the moon's surface, their boots sinking slightly into the fine regolith. Edward's trained eyes swept the horizon, noting the towering spires of an alien city in the far distance. "I don't recognize that architecture," he murmured. "It's not human or Iconian." Primus nodded, her suit's external cameras zooming in on the ruins. "Nor do I. It seems we're not the first to face extinction in this part of the galaxy." They made their way across the lunar wasteland, each lost in thought about the implications of their discovery. The mining outpost soon came into view, a squat utilitarian structure half buried by centuries of meteorite impacts. Inside, they found a treasure trove of abandoned equipment and supplies. Edward's military training proved invaluable as he quickly identified which components could be repurposed for their ship's life support systems. As they gathered what they needed, Primus paused by a dust-covered console. With a few deft movements, she brought the ancient system online. Data flowed across the screen in an unfamiliar script. "Fascinating," she murmured. "This outpost belonged to a species called the Zorans. According to these logs, they achieved interstellar travel over 50,000 years ago." Edward joined her, studying the alien text. "What happened to them?" Primus's luminescence dimmed slightly. "The same thing that nearly happened to us. They destroyed themselves in a war that lasted centuries." The weight of their mission pressed down on Edward's shoulders as they gathered the last of the supplies and began the trek back to their ship. The stark landscape seemed to mock their efforts, a grim reminder of civilizations that had risen and fallen before them. As they approached their vessel, they saw AIMD-7 waiting outside, its photoreceptors pulsing urgently. The droid emitted a series of rapid beeps and clicks that sent Primus rushing to the ship's communication array. "What is it?" Edward asked, setting down their salvaged equipment. Primus's skin rippled with a complex pattern of emotions. "It's a distress signal," she said, her voice filled with disbelief, "from an Iconian escape pod." Edward's enhanced mind quickly grasped the implications. "You said your people were scattered across the galaxy. Could this be one of the survivors?" Primus nodded, her fingers flying across the controls. "The signal. It belongs to Zira, my research assistant. I thought she had perished when our homeworld fell." The ship's computer pinpointed the signal's origin to a nearby asteroid belt. Edward studied the tactical display, weighing their options. "If we go after her, we risk exposure," he said. "But another Iconian could be invaluable to our mission." Primus turned to him, her alien features set in dedication. "We can't leave her. Zira's expertise in genetics could be the key to creating a viable hybrid species." Edward nodded, making his decision. "AIMD-7, how long until the ship is spaceworthy?" The droid beeped in word, displaying its calculations on a nearby screen. Edward translated the Iconian script in his mind. 4 hours, he announced. "Just enough time to integrate the new life support components and patch the hull breach." They worked tirelessly, Edward's augmented strength and Primus's intimate knowledge of Iconian technology complementing each other perfectly. As the final system checks completed, they strapped themselves in for launch. The ship rose from the crater, its stealth systems still offline but its engines purring with renewed strength. They navigated carefully through the debris field, following the faint distress signal to a tumbling asteroid deep within the belt. There, half buried in rock and ice, they found the Iconian escape pod. Using the ship's tractor beam, they carefully maneuvered it into their cargo hold. Edward and Primus rushed to the hold, AIMD-7 close behind with its medical sensors active. The pod's hatch opened with a hiss of escaping air, revealing a slender Iconian form in suspended animation. Primus let out a sound that might have been a sob as she recognized her long-lost assistant. As they began the revival process, a shrill alarm cut through the air. AIMD-7 beeped frantically, its sensors detecting a powerful transmission emanating from the pod. "What's happening?" Edward demanded, his combat instincts kicking in. Primus's skin paled, her luminescence dimming with dread. "It's an automated distress call," she explained, "designed to activate when the pod is opened. It's broadcasting our location to the nearest military outpost." Before they could react, the ship's sensors lit up with multiple incoming signals. Edward's enhanced vision picked out the details on the tactical display. "We've got 2 groups converging on our position," he reported grimly. "A human strike team from the north and... what are those?" He pointed to a swarm of smaller signatures approaching from the opposite direction. Primus's eyes widened in recognition. Iconian battle drones, fully automated and programmed to eliminate any perceived threats. As Zira stirred in her pod, slowly regaining consciousness, Edward's mind raced through their options. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and caught between 2 hostile forces. Yet as he looked at Primus and the slowly awakening Zira, he knew retreat wasn't an option. "I have a plan," he said, his voice steady despite the gravity of their situation. "But it's going to require perfect timing and a bit of luck." Primus nodded, trust evident in her alien features. "What do you need me to do?" Edward allowed himself a grim smile. "We're going to turn their strength against them, make them fight each other while we slip away in the chaos." As he outlined his strategy, Zira finally opened her eyes, taking in her surroundings with confusion. Primus quickly filled her in on their desperate situation and their mission to save both their species. Zira's eyes widened as she processed the information. "Wait," she said, her voice hoarse from centuries of disuse. "I know of a place that might help us. A secret Iconian sanctuary world, hidden from both humans and our own military." Edward and Primus exchanged glances, hope rekindling in their eyes. But before they could probe further, the ship's proximity alarms blared. Their enemies had arrived. "No time to discuss it now," Edward said, moving to the pilot's seat. "We need to execute our plan and get out of here. Once we're safe, we'll set a course for this sanctuary world." As the human strike team and Iconian drones closed in, Edward's fingers danced across the controls, preparing to implement his daring strategy. The fate of two species hung in the balance as they prepared to make their desperate bid for escape. Freedom. The ship's engines roared to life as Edward executed his plan with surgical precision. "Initiating countermeasures," he announced, his fingers dancing across the control panel. The ship's remaining stealth systems engaged, cloaking them in a shimmering veil of distorted space. Simultaneously, Edward launched a series of decoy probes, each emitting a false signature mimicking their vessel. The effect was immediate and chaotic. The human strike team and Iconian drones, caught off guard by the sudden proliferation of targets, turned their weapons on each other. Explosions blossomed in the void of space as the two forces tore into one another. "Now's our chance," Primus said, her skin pulsing with nervous energy. "Plot a course out of here, quickly!" Edward didn't need to be told twice. He deftly maneuvered their ship through the debris field, using the larger pieces of wreckage as additional cover. For a moment, it seemed they might escape unscathed. But their luck couldn't hold forever. A stray missile, fired blindly by one of the warring factions, clipped their starboard engine. The ship lurched violently, alarms blaring throughout the cockpit. "We've lost propulsion!" Primus shouted over the din, her hands flying over the engineering console. "The entire system is failing." Edward's mind raced, calculating their options. His enhanced vision picked out a small blue-green moon orbiting a nearby gas giant. "There," he said, pointing to the celestial body. "It's habitable. We'll have to make an emergency landing." The ship plummeted through the moon's atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot from the friction. Edward fought with the controls, using every ounce of his piloting skill to keep them from burning up on entry. They hit the ground hard, skidding across a rocky plain before coming to rest at the base of a towering cliff face. As the dust settled, Edward ran a quick systems check. "Life support is holding, but barely," he reported. "We need to find shelter and assess the damage." The group quickly gathered what supplies they could salvage and emerged from the battered ship. The moon's atmosphere was thin but breathable, its landscape a mix of jagged rock formations and sparse, alien vegetation. "Look," Zira said, pointing to a series of dark openings in the cliff face. "Caves. They should provide adequate shelter while we make repairs." They made their way to the cave network, setting up a makeshift base camp using components from their damaged vessel. As days turned into weeks, tensions began to rise within the group. Edward and Primus found themselves at odds over how to proceed. "We need to focus on repairing the ship," Edward argued during one heated exchange. "Every moment we spend here increases the risk of detection." Primus's skin rippled with frustration. "And what good is a repaired ship if we don't survive long enough to use it? We need to prioritize finding sustainable food and water sources." Their arguments were cut short by a fit of violent coughing from Zira. The Iconian scientist had been growing progressively weaker since their landing, her body racked by a mysterious illness. AIMD-7 beeped in distress, its medical sensors unable to provide a diagnosis. "My programming is insufficient to treat Zira's condition," the droid reported. "We must reach the sanctuary world as soon as possible." The urgency of their situation forced Edward and Primus to set aside their differences and work together. They embarked on perilous expeditions across the moon's treacherous terrain, searching for resources and replacement parts for their ship. During one such mission, they stumbled upon the ruins of an ancient alien outpost. The structure was unlike anything they had ever seen, its architecture defying known physical principles. "This technology," Primus breathed, her eyes wide with wonder as she examined a still-functioning control panel. "It's light years beyond anything my people have achieved." Edward nodded, his tactical mind already considering the possibilities. "If we can understand even a fraction of this, it could be the key to repairing our ship and saving Zira." As they delved deeper into the outpost, a shadowy figure emerged from a hidden alcove. Both Edward and Primus raised their weapons, only to find themselves facing a bizarre alien creature. The being was tall and spindly, with iridescent skin and multiple sets of eyes, arranged in a spiral pattern across its face. It raised its hands in a gesture of peace. "I am Crix," it said, its voice a melodious whisper that seemed to bypass their ears and speak directly into their minds. "I have been stranded on this moon for countless cycles. Perhaps we can help each other." Edward and Primus exchanged glances, weighing the potential risks and benefits of this unexpected encounter. After a moment of silent communication, they lowered their weapons. "We're listening," Edward said cautiously. Crix's eyes shimmered with what might have been hope. "I possess knowledge of this outpost and the surrounding star systems. In exchange for passage off this desolate rock, I offer my assistance in repairing your vessel and navigating to your destination." As they discussed terms with Crix, Edward couldn't shake the feeling that this chance encounter might be the turning point in their mission. The aliens' knowledge could be the key to their survival and the future of both their species. But before they could finalize their agreement, a piercing alarm echoed through the outpost. Crix's eyes widened in terror. "The Harvester," he whispered, his voice filled with dread. "It comes." Edward and Primus rushed to a nearby view screen, watching in horror as a massive, planet-killing weapon appeared on the horizon. The race to repair their ship and escape the moon had suddenly become a desperate fight for survival against an implacable foe. As the Harvester drew closer, its ominous presence casting a shadow over the alien landscape, Edward realized that the true test of their mission and their newfound alliance was only just beginning. The ground shook as the Harvester loomed ever closer, its massive form blotting out the alien sky. Edward's mind raced, calculating their odds of survival. He knew what had to be done. "Primus," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "You need to get everyone to the ship. Now." Primus's skin rippled with alarm. "What about you?" Edward gestured to the alien outpost control panel. "I'm staying behind to activate the defense systems. It's our only chance." Primus opened her mouth to protest, but Edward cut her off. "There's no time to argue. Go!" For a moment their eyes locked, 1,000 unspoken words passing between them. Then Primus nodded, her luminescence dimming with reluctance. "Be careful," she whispered, before turning to shepherd the others towards their battered ship. Edward watched them go, his enhanced vision tracking their progress across the rocky terrain. Once they were safely aboard, he turned his attention to the alien controls, his augmented mind deciphering the complex symbols at lightning speed. The ship's engines roared to life just as Edward's fingers danced across the final sequence. A low hum filled the air, building to a crescendo as the outpost's defense systems activated. A burst of brilliant energy erupted from hidden emitters, racing towards the Harvester in a blinding wave. The electromagnetic pulse struck the massive weapon, its systems flickering and failing. But in its final moments of function, the Harvester released a swarm of smaller drones. Edward watched in horror as one latched onto the escaping ship's hull, unnoticed by its occupants. As the ship disappeared into the atmosphere, Edward allowed himself a moment of relief before the reality of his situation set in. He was alone on an alien moon, facing an unknown threat. But as he turned to survey the outpost, his eye caught a subtle irregularity in the floor pattern. Curiosity piqued, Edward investigated, his enhanced strength easily shifting a concealed panel to reveal a hidden passage. Without hesitation, he descended into the darkness. Meanwhile, aboard the fleeing ship, Primus struggled to maintain their course as systems flickered and alarms blared. "Something's interfering with our navigation," she called out, her hands flying over the controls. Crix, the alien refugee, peered at a nearby display. "It appears to be some sort of drone attached to our hull." Before they could address this new threat, a fit of violent coughing drew their attention. Zira collapsed to the floor, her body racked with spasms. AIMD-7 beeped frantically, its medical sensors working overtime. "Her condition is deteriorating rapidly," the droid reported. "I'm detecting anomalies in her genetic structure that don't match any known Iconian patterns." As Primus tended to Zira, her mind raced. They needed to reach the sanctuary world, but without stable navigation, they were flying blind. And now, with Zira's mysterious illness progressing so quickly, a weak signal cut through her spiraling thoughts. Edward's voice, barely audible through the static, reached out to them. "Underground facility, advanced medical tech, hybridization data." Primus froze, torn between her duty to the mission and her growing feelings for Edward. The decision greatly troubled on her, each second feeling like an eternity as she considered their options. Her deliberation was cut short as the ship's long-range scanners lit up. Multiple vessels were converging on their position, a mix of human and Iconian signatures. "We've got company," Crix announced, his multifaceted eyes widening with alarm. Primus made her choice. "Plot a course back to the moon," she ordered, her voice tight with persistence. "We're not leaving Edward behind." As they approached the moon, they witnessed a spectacular sight. The alien outpost, now fully activated by Edward, was unleashing a barrage of energy weapons against the first wave of arriving ships. The night sky lit up with explosions as Edward bought them precious time to land. The rescue operation was tense and chaotic. Edward emerged from the underground facility, his arms laden with alien technology and data storage devices. He and Primus worked in perfect synchronization, loading the critical equipment onto the ship as Crix provided covering fire with the ship's weapons. With the pursuit closing in, they launched back into space. Edward quickly integrated the alien medical tech into their systems, AIMD-7 assisting as they began emergency treatment for Zira. "The jump gate network," Crix said urgently, gesturing to the navigation console. "It's our only chance to lose them." Edward nodded, his fingers flying over the controls as he input the coordinates. The ship shuddered as it entered the ancient network, the strain on their damaged systems evident in every groan of the hull. They emerged in uncharted space, their pursuers left behind but their ship barely functional. As the immediate danger passed, the weight of their situation settled over them. Edward turned to Primus, his expression a mix of gratitude and concern. "Thank you for coming back," he said softly. Primus's skin pulsed with a warm glow. "We're in this together," she replied. "All of us." Their moment was interrupted by AIMD-7's urgent beeping. "I've completed my analysis of Zira's condition," the droid reported. "It appears her illness is the result of deliberate genetic modification, likely by Iconians opposed to hybridization with humans." The revelation hung heavy in the air, raising new questions about the challenges they would face. Edward and Primus exchanged glances, the implications clear. Their mission had just become far more complex than they had ever imagined. As Crix worked to repair their damaged systems, and AIMD-7 continued Zira's treatment, Edward and Primus began to sift through the vast amount of data they had recovered from the underground facility. "This changes everything," Edward murmured, his eyes scanning the information on human Iconian hybridization. "Creating a viable hybrid species, it's going to require a series of complex genetic treatments for both parents." Primus nodded, her luminescence flickering with a mix of emotions. "And we'll likely face opposition from both our species," she added. As they continued to work, the unspoken question hung between them. Would they be willing to become the first human Iconian couple to attempt conception? The practical and ethical implications were staggering. Their ship drifted through the unknown region of space, damaged but still functional. The immediate crisis had passed, but the true challenges of their mission were only beginning to unfold. With pursers temporarily left behind and a wealth of new information at their disposal, the small crew faced an uncertain future filled with both promise and peril. Peril. As they contemplated their next move, a violent shudder ran through the ship's hull. Alarms blared and the vessel lurched sideways. "We've exited the jump gate," Crix called out, his multiple eyes scanning the readouts. "But something's wrong with the stabilizers." Edward rushed to the cockpit, his augmented reflexes allowing him to navigate the tilting floor with ease. He slid into the pilot's seat, hands flying over the controls as he assessed their situation. "We're in a binary star system," he reported, voice tense but controlled. "Multiple habitable planets detected, but we're losing altitude fast. Brace for atmospheric entry." The ship groaned and shook as it plummeted towards the nearest planet. Edward's military training kicked in, his enhanced mind calculating trajectories and adjusting thrusters with inhuman precision. The view screen filled with a sea of green as they descended into a vast forest. "Hang on!" Edward shouted, pulling back on the controls with all his strength. The ship's nose lifted at the last moment, skimming treetops before slamming into a clearing. It skidded across the ground, leaving a trail of upturned earth and broken vegetation before finally coming to rest at the edge of the forest. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the distant calls of alien wildlife. Edward's ears rang as he shook off the impact, quickly checking on his companions. "Everyone all right?" he called out. Primus emerged from behind a console, her luminescence flickering erratically. "I'm functional," she replied, moving to help Zira, who was slumped in her seat. AIMD-7 beeped affirmatively, already scanning the others for injuries. Crix unfolded himself from a protective ball, his iridescent skin shimmering with stress patterns. "We're alive," the alien said, a note of wonder in his telepathic voice. "But where are we?" Edward activated the external sensors, gathering data on their surroundings. "Atmosphere is breathable, but the climate is unusual. Those binary stars are creating some extreme temperature fluctuations." As if on cue, a wave of heat washed over them, followed moments later by a bone-chilling cold. Outside, they could see the local flora reacting, leaves furling and unfurling in rapid succession. "We need to set up a base camp," Edward decided. "Crix, help me salvage what we can from the ship. Primus, you and AIMD-7 focus on treating Zira. Her condition seems to have worsened during the landing." They worked tirelessly, battling the planet's mercurial weather as they established a temporary shelter. Edward's military training proved invaluable as he organized their limited resources and set up defensive perimeters. As night fell, bringing with it a spectacular aurora from the interplay of the binary stars and the planet's magnetic field, Edward and Primus found a moment alone. "How's Zira?" Edward asked, his voice low with concern. Primus's skin rippled with a mix of relief and worry. "The medical technology we salvaged from the outpost is helping. We've managed to stabilize her, but—" She trailed off, her luminescence dimming. Edward placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling the warmth of her bioluminescence through his fingers. "But it's not a cure," he finished for her. Primus nodded. "We need to find a more permanent solution, and soon." Their conversation was interrupted by Crix, who approached with a concerned expression. "I've been trying to establish our location, but something's interfering with our navigation systems. It seems we're effectively stranded here." Edward frowned, his tactical mind already formulating plans. "We'll need to explore, gather resources, maybe find some local materials to repair the ship." The next day, Edward and Primus set out on a reconnaissance mission, leaving Crix and AIMD-7 to continue repairs and monitor Zira. They hadn't gone far when they encountered their first sign of indigenous life. A creature resembling a cross between a tree and an insect stepped into their path. It stood nearly as tall as Edward, its bark-like exoskeleton covered in swirling patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Edward tensed, ready for a confrontation, but Primus held up a hand, Her skin flashed in a complex pattern, and to Edward's surprise, the creature responded with a similar display. "Remarkable," Primus breathed. "They communicate through bioluminescence, not unlike my people. I believe I can establish basic communication." Over the next hour, through a combination of light patterns, gestures, and Primus's xenolinguistic skills, they managed to convey their peaceful intentions to the being they dubbed an Arborian. The Arborian, seemingly satisfied that they posed no threat, led them deeper into the forest. They soon found themselves in a clearing filled with other Arborians, all gathered around the entrance to a vast underground cave system. Inside the caves, Edward and Primus discovered a network of bioluminescent fungi, their soft glow filling the caverns with an otherworldly light. The Arborians gestured excitedly at the fungi, their own bioluminescence pulsing in complex patterns. "I think," Primus said slowly, her eyes wide with wonder, "they're trying to tell us these fungi have healing properties." Edward carefully collected samples, his mind racing with possibilities. Could this be the key to curing Zira, or even aiding in their hybridization efforts? As they made their way back to camp, laden with fungal samples and newfound hope, a crackling sound from Edward's communicator stopped them in their tracks. "Edward, Primus," Crix's voice came through, distorted but audible. "I've made a discovery about the drone that attacked our ship. It contains advanced Iconian technology, including a quantum entanglement device. This could be our key to contacting the sanctuary world." Edward and Primus exchanged looks of excitement and apprehension. Just as they were about to respond, another transmission cut through the static. "To any survivors, human outpost, coordinates." The fragmented message faded into static, leaving Edward and Primus staring at each other in shock. They weren't alone on this planet after all. As night fell once again, painting the sky with the now familiar dance of auroras, the team gathered to discuss their next steps. The promise of the healing fungi, the potential of the quantum entanglement device, and the mystery of the human distress signal all competed for their attention. Edward looked at Primus, seeing his own mix of hope and uncertainty reflected in her luminescent patterns. They both knew that the decisions they made here, on this strange double-star world, could shape the future of both their species. Just as they were about to delve into their options, AIMD-7 let out an urgent series of beeps. Its sensors had detected something new, an object approaching their position from deep space. The group rushed to the ship's remaining functional sensors, watching as a blip appeared on the long-range scanners. Its trajectory and energy signature were unmistakable. A scout ship, likely drawn by the energy burst from their use of the jump gate. As the unknown vessel drew closer, Edward and Primus shared a look of silent understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The fate of their mission, their budding relationship, and the future of human-Iconian relations now hung in the balance, with this mysterious planet as their stage. As the unknown vessel drew closer, Edward and Primus shared a look of silent understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The fate of their mission, their budding relationship, and the future of human-Iconian relations now hung in the balance with this mysterious planet as their temporary home. In the days that followed, Edward and Primus found themselves grappling with a decision that would change their lives forever. The data they had recovered from the underground facility had revealed the possibility of human-Iconian hybridization, and now they stood on the precipice of attempting it themselves. "Are we really ready for this?" Edward asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as they stood in the makeshift medical bay they had set up in the ship's cargo hold. Primus's skin rippled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "I don't know if anyone can truly be ready for something like this," she replied. "But if we don't try, who will?" AIMD-7 beeped softly, its mechanical voice calm and reassuring. "I have analyzed the data from the outpost and integrated it with my medical programming. While the process will be complex, I believe I can guide you through it safely." Edward took a deep breath, his augmented mind racing through calculations and probabilities. "All right," he said finally. "Let's do this." The process was unlike anything either of them had experienced before. AIMD-7 directed them through a series of genetic treatments, carefully monitoring their physiology as their bodies began to align for conception. The unique environment of the binary star system added an extra layer of complexity, causing unexpected fluctuations in their cellular structures. Fascinating, AIMD-7 chirped as it adjusted its approach. The gravitational effects of the binary stars are accelerating certain aspects of the process. We'll need to compensate. As Edward and Primus underwent the delicate procedure, Crix and Zira prepared for their own mission. The human distress signal they had detected earlier couldn't be ignored, especially given their precarious situation. "We'll take a small group of Arborians with us," Crix explained, his iridescent skin shimmering with anticipation. "They know this terrain better than we ever could." Zira nodded weakly, her condition stable but still fragile. "Be careful out there," she said. "This planet has already shown us it's full of surprises." The expedition set out at dawn, guided by 3 Arborians whose bark-like skin seemed to shift and change with the rapidly alternating temperatures. They moved swiftly through the dense forest, communicating through a mix of bioluminescent flashes and telepathic impressions. Back at the base camp, AIMD-7 announced a breakthrough. "Conception has occurred," the droid reported, its sensors focused on Primus. "The embryo appears to be developing at an accelerated rate, likely due to the unique properties of this planet." Edward and Primus exchanged looks of wonder and concern. They were now expectant parents to potentially the first human-Iconian hybrid in history. "What do we need to do to ensure its health?" Primus asked, her skin pulsing with maternal protectiveness. AIMD-7 whirred thoughtfully. "Regular treatments with the bioluminescent fungi we discovered may be crucial. Its properties seem to stabilize the genetic fluctuations I'm observing." As they processed this news, Edward's military instincts kicked in. The scout ship they had detected earlier was now in orbit, its presence a constant threat. "We need to hide," he said, moving to the ship's sensor controls. "This planet's magnetic field. If we can harness it, we might be able to create a natural cloaking effect." Working tirelessly, Edward engineered a system to amplify the magnetic distortions around their camp. Soon they were effectively invisible to orbital scans. However, the protective measure came at a cost. "Our long-range communications are offline," Edward reported grimly. "We're cut off from Crix and Zira's team." Days passed as they monitored the embryo's development and kept a wary eye on the orbiting scout ship. Then, breaking through the magnetic interference, came an urgent communication from Crix. "Edward, Primus, we've found the source of the signal." Crix's voice crackled through the static. "It's a human ship, far more advanced than anything we've seen. There's a survivor in stasis, a Captain Lyra Davis. She's been here for over 200 years. Before they could fully process this revelation, Crix's tone turned urgent. "Zira's condition is worsening. The journey and this planet's environment have accelerated her illness. We're stabilizing her with the Arborian fungi, but we need to return to base camp immediately." Edward and Primus shared a look of concern. The situation had become even more complex than they could have imagined. They now faced a critical decision: stay on the planet to protect the rapidly developing hybrid embryo, or leave to seek better medical care for Zira and continue their mission to the Iconian sanctuary world. As they grappled with this dilemma, AIMD-7 interrupted with another update. "The embryo's development has accelerated beyond my initial projections. If we leave the planet now, the change in environment could be fatal." Edward ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of command on his shoulders. "We can't risk the embryo," he said finally, "but we can't abandon Zira either. And this Captain Davis, she could be a valuable ally, or a complication we can't afford." Primus's skin flickered with rapid calculations. "Perhaps we can use the Arborian fungi to create a stable environment for the embryo, allowing us to leave the planet," she suggested. "We could also use it to treat Zira more effectively." As they debated their options, the sensor array beeped insistently. The scout ship was changing its orbit, moving into a position that suggested it was preparing for atmospheric entry. Edward's augmented reflexes kicked into high gear as he began formulating a plan. "We need to move fast," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Primus, work with AIMD-7 to prepare a portable incubation chamber for the embryo using the fungi. I'll try to boost our shields to withstand a rapid ascent. As they raced against time, the fate of their unborn child, their mission, and potentially the future of human-Iconian relations hung in the balance. The binary stars cast their ever-changing light over the alien world, indifferent to the drama unfolding beneath them. As Edward finished his assessment of their precarious situation, the ship's sensors blared to life. The scout vessel had begun its descent towards the planet's surface. "We're out of time," Edward declared, his augmented mind racing through possibilities. "We need to act now." Primus's skin flashed with urgent patterns. "What's the plan?" Drawing on his military training, Edward outlined a daring strategy that addressed all their pressing concerns simultaneously. "We'll create a mobile stasis pod for the embryo using our ship's tech and the arborean fungi. It'll maintain the necessary environmental conditions while allowing us to transport it safely." AIMD-7 whirred in agreement. "I can assist with the pod's construction and monitor the embryo's vital signs during transit." As they worked feverishly to assemble the stasis pod, Edward established communication with Crix. "We need you to camouflage the base camp, use the local flora and bioluminescent fungi to create natural-looking cover. It'll shield us from aerial detection." Crix's voice crackled through the comm. "Understood. We'll start immediately." The next hours were a blur of activity. Edward and Primus, guided by AIMD-7's precise instructions, salvaged components from their damaged ship and integrated them with carefully cultivated arborean fungi. The result was a compact, pulsating pod that mimicked the unique conditions of the binary star system. As they carefully transferred the rapidly developing embryo into the pod, Primus's skin rippled with a mix of anxiety and hope. "Will it be enough?" she asked softly. Edward placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It has to be." Outside, the sound of the approaching scout ship grew louder. Edward's enhanced hearing picked up the whine of its engines as it entered the lower atmosphere. "Time to move," he announced, helping Primus secure the stasis pod in their partially repaired ship. Crix and Zira arrived moments later, supporting each other as they boarded. Zira's condition had stabilized, but she remained weak. Behind them, two Arboreans carried the Cryo pod containing the still unconscious Captain Davis. As the group strapped in, Edward's fingers flew over the ship's controls. He input a complex series of commands, plotting a course that would utilize the planet's unusual magnetic properties. "Hold on," he warned as the engines roared to life. "This might get rough." The ship lurched forward, accelerating rapidly. Through the view screen, they watched as the scout vessel touched down near their now camouflaged base camp. Edward gritted his teeth, pushing their craft to its limits as they climbed through the atmosphere. As they broke free of the planet's gravity well, Edward executed a daring maneuver. Using the immense gravitational pull of one of the binary stars, he slingshot their ship around it, catapulting them towards the coordinates of the Iconian sanctuary world. The G-forces pressed them into their seats as the star's fiery surface filled their view. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed they might be pulled in, but Edward's calculations proved true. They whipped around the star and shot off into deep space, the scout ship left far behind. As they hurtled through the void at unprecedented speeds, AIMD-7 connected the quantum entanglement device recovered from the Iconian drone to their communications array. "Sending coded message to the sanctuary world now," the droid reported, alerting them of our imminent arrival and the nature of our mission. Hours stretched into days as they journeyed towards their destination. Edward and Primus took turns monitoring the stasis pod, their hands often intertwined as they watched over their unborn child. Zira's condition remained stable, while Captain Davis slumbered on, unaware of the momentous events unfolding around her. As they approached the sanctuary world, tension mounted. Would they be welcomed or treated as intruders? The ship's sensors detected a sophisticated defense network surrounding the planet. Edward prepared evasive maneuvers, but before he could act, a transmission came through. "Unidentified vessel," a voice spoke in perfect galactic standard. "We've received your quantum-entangled message. You are cleared for landing. Welcome to Haven." As they entered the planet's atmosphere, a sprawling cityscape came into view. Structures of both human and Iconian design stood side by side, a testament to unprecedented cooperation. They touched down on a landing pad where a group of human and Iconian scientists waited. As the ship's doors opened, Edward and Primus shared a look of wonder and relief. They had made it. A tall Iconian stepped forward, his skin glowing with a welcoming pattern. "I am Dr. Nilux," he introduced himself. "We've been eagerly awaiting your arrival. Please, follow me. We have much to discuss." As they were led towards an advanced medical facility, Edward couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. They had come so far, faced so much, and now stood on the precipice of a new chapter, not just in their lives, but in the history of both their species. The stasis pod containing their hybrid child pulsed gently in his arms, a living symbol of hope for the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united in their quest for understanding and cooperation between their peoples.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.